Hello everybody, Trevor here. Let's talk about the STEAM team. Now the STEAM team is a group of core characters, which was first pitched at the beginning of Season 8 by Hit Entertainment. The first set of STEAM team members were Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy, Toby, and Emily. It is also the reason why the engine roll call theme exists, which in my opinion is an okay song, but not as good as the original from the classic era. Since the beginning of the Big World Big Adventures era, Edward, Henry, and Toby were replaced by two new females who are Nia and Rebecca. And that's also why they had to change the engine roll call theme a little bit. In my honest opinion, when it comes to the STEAM team idea, I thought it was pretty necessary because we want kids of every generation to know who are the main characters, especially the current ones. Say, did you know that Duck was going to be part of the STEAM team but got replaced by Emily in the end? Yeah, maybe that's why some people hate Emily. Now for today's video, I'm going to discuss my top 5 favorite STEAM team members. And no, I'm not going to include Duck because he got replaced by Emily, which I didn't mind because Duck already has a home on the Little Western Line, along with Oliver and Toad. And I always like to have a variety of females in the team besides males. Let's get started. Number 5. When it comes to females, my favorite of the three is Emily. The reason why I like Emily is because not only that she's beautiful, but she can also be very friendly and helpful. She's like the big sister of the team because sometimes she can be bossy, prideful, and impatient. But she does mean well, and I'm actually proud that she got her spot at Tima's Sheds at the very end of Calling All Engines because, she deserved it. Heck, she didn't even get a number until season 24. How fascinating is that? But unfortunately, she's one of those characters that's been overhated by the Thomas fan community, mainly because she replaced Duck. And as I said before, I didn't mind that change because Duck already has a shed on the west side of Sodor, and I always like to have a main female lead every now and then. Say what you will about her, at least she has character flaws, unlike Nia and Rebecca. Lastly, I want to point out that at first, I thought it was strange for Emily to speak with a Scottish accent in the UK dub of the show, but after doing some research on her original designer, her voice is starting to grow on me. The number 4 spot goes to Gordon. And no, that's not a joke. Gordon is a big, strong, and fast engine, and one of the most important engines on Sir Topham Hatt's railway. He's the one who pulls the express, and doesn't like to take goods trains. Although he can be rather pompous and thinks he knows everything, but there are times where he can be a good friend to his fellow engines. For example, in The Trouble with Mud, he helps James push his passenger train up the hill. Another instance was in Down the Mine, where he pulled Thomas out of the mine with a cable rope and winch. In terms of his voice actor, I think the best voices are Keith Wickham and Carrie Shale because they both gave him a deep, pompous voice, and that's how I always picture him as. Overall, Gordon is a great character, and I'm still glad they kept him in the STEAM team, unlike Henry who had to be kicked out in favor of Rebecca. Number 3. James. James is a splendid red mixed traffic engine with a shiny gold dome who can be smug and vain at times, but can also be lots of fun. In The Adventure Begins, he was painted all black before his accident in the climax. He likes to carry passengers over freight cars any day, unlike Mike who does the exact opposite. When I was a kid, I always thought James was a girl because of his face, but in reality, he's actually a male. Maybe that's why they chose Susan Roman as James for the first movie. But seriously, folks, I put James as number 3 because he's one of the most popular engines in the STEAM team. And like Gordon, I'm so thankful that they still kept him in the show, unlike Edward who had to be replaced by Nia. Sure, he can be a bit arrogant at times, but just like Gordon, he means well and can be a very hard worker. For example, in the season 11 episode, Thomas in Trouble, after Thomas broke down, James agreed to help him get the children to their concert on time. Another instance was in No Joke for James, where he once played a trick on Thomas, making him think that Gordon was to pull cars instead of the express. After James got into trouble for his joke, he decided to make up for his mistake by shunting and pulling freight cars all day long, and eventually took the railway inspector to Knapford Station to see Sir Topham Hatt, which he got praised for. As for his voice, in my honest opinion, the best voices for James are Michael Angelis, Carrie Shale, Keith Wickham, and Rob Rackstraw. They all did an excellent job as James in the TV series. No offense to Susan Roman, as I said a million times already. I just prefer her as Sailor Jupiter and all those other non-Thomas roles she was in. Number 2. Percy. Percy is a small green saddle tank engine who was brought to Sodor to help Thomas and Edward out while James, Gordon, and Henry went on strike. He's Thomas's best friend and is the youngest member of the steam team. He can also be a scaredy cat at times, but knows when to be brave, such as in Tale the Brave, where he had to save James from an avalanche. He's like the Millhouse of the show because he can also be teased and bullied for his size. Although it is very good that Percy's got a lot of recognition in the franchise, but when it comes to the movies and specials, he doesn't get the lead role that much. It was mostly Thomas who gets the lead role in almost every single movie and special out there. And that's unfortunate because I kind of would like to see him travel around the world like Thomas did in Big World Big Adventures, where he can practice more of his bravery and maybe travel to Colombia where Gator works. I also would like to see a 2-part special where he actually competes in the shunting competition in the Great Railway Show. And maybe Gina can be his mentor for that. In fact, Percy's only lead roles in terms of specials so far are Day of the Diesels and Tale the Brave. Let's talk about his voice. When it comes to Thomas and the Magic Railroad, I think Linda Ballantine does a much better job than Michael Angelis because I always picture Percy with a more youthful voice, whether squeaky or not. And as I said a million times already, Michael Angelis would have been a better James than Susan Roman, but not a good Percy. Besides, Angelis pretty much gave Percy the same exact voice as James in the original work prints of the movie. What I like about Linda's impression is that she made Percy sound more boyish and British, which makes more sense than for James because I always picture James as a middle-aged engine between young and old. It's not a perfect voice for Percy, but it still works in my opinion. Oh, and did you know that she is the voice of Sailor Moon in the Cloverway dub? Back on topic. I also like Martin Sherman, Keith Wickham, Nigel Pilkington, and Christopher Raglan for the character. Though it is hard for me which of these new voices is better than the other because I think they all did a very decent job as Percy in the CGI series. Another thing I like about Percy is that, like Thomas, he can be quite cheeky and can get into trouble at times. But he can also be accident prone, such as in Percy's Chocolate Crunch, where he got himself covered in sticky gooey chocolate. And another example is in Percy Takes the Plunge, where he gets pushed past the danger sign by the trolls and trucks, leading him plunging into the water. One last bit of trivia I'd like to discuss is that his design is unique and doesn't match any real-life basis. However, he is based on a 040 saddle tank engine built by the Avonside Engine Company of Bristol, but has components from other builders such as Hunslet of Leeds. And those are some of the reasons why I like Percy so much. Before I get to my number 1 pick, here are some honorable mentions. Edward, Henry, and Toby. The reason they didn't make it to the list is because they've been replaced by Nia and Rebecca. Also, they're all old and wise. However, in some of the newer episodes, they can be gullible misfits like in Percy and the Monster at Brandom. In addition, I can understand replacing Edward and Toby because 1, Toby already has a branch line since season 5 for some reason, and Edward decided to move to Wellsworth Sheds so that he can be near his own branch line, which makes some sense. As for Henry, well, let's just say his personality has changed a lot in the course of time. He can be grumpy like in Percy Takes the Plunge, and other times he can be a bit shy and has a love for nature like in Henry's Forest. Maybe that's why they replaced him with Rebecca in the Big World Big Adventures era. Alright, without further ado, let's talk about my number 1 most favorite member of the steam team. Thomas the Tank Engine. Yes, I know I'm gonna get some backlash for saying this, but I don't mind Thomas being the main character for the most part of the show because he has the number one painted on his sides, which makes him the leader. He can be cheeky and fussy at times, but is always eager to help out a friend in need. The reason why I put Thomas on the number one spot on this list is because he's someone I can totally relate to. In real life, I work in retail, and I want to do my best to do a great job at work by helping out customers whenever I can. I'm also very punctual and very organized. Thomas is also the reason why blue is my favorite color, not to mention that it matches the blue sky. The only problems I have with Thomas is that sometimes he can be a bit of an idiot. Despite his eagerness, he can be forgetful and sometimes doesn't listen at all. Some examples include Steamy Sodor, Old Wheezy Wobbles, and one of my least favorites in the Big World Big Adventures era, Thomas Makes a Mistake, which is just like hundreds of other Thomas episodes where he makes the same exact stupid mistake over and over and over again. And to make matters worse, starting with season 25, he's going to be the main character in every single freaking episode! What the hell? Okay, I can understand that Thomas is the main character of the show, and that's why it's called Thomas and Friends, but that doesn't mean you can't focus on other characters, especially the minor ones like the narrow gauge engines and the pack members. You need to have a variety of different lead roles besides Thomas, otherwise the show will get too stale and repetitive. I mean, what if I want to make an episode starring Diesel 10? Or an episode starring Splatter and Dodge? Or even an episode starring Norman and Dennis? Again, you'll need variety or the show will get boring. Let's move on to his voice. Although I do like Martin Sherman, Ben Small, John Hassler, and Joseph May as the main title character, but my most favorite of the Thomas voice roles has to be Eddie Glenn, because not only that he gave Thomas a more youthful British accent than what John Bellis did in the original work prints of the first film, but he's very nostalgic to me. And it makes me wish that the classic series had voice actors to begin with. No offense to John Bellis, I think his voice would work better for a much older engine than Thomas, like Albert the First Railway engine from the Railway series. I can understand why some people hate the character, but I don't mind him appearing that often in the show, just as long as we got more variety of other lead roles like Duck, Oliver, Toad, and some of the other Steam Team members such as Percy. It's just like saying that I don't mind Sora being the main protagonist in almost every single Kingdom Hearts game because he's such a likable guy. And those are all the reasons why Thomas is my number one most favorite Steam Team member of all time. Now tell me in the comments section about who are your favorite members of the Steam Team. Do you agree with everything I say, or do you have your own personal preference of team members? Because I'd like to know. This is Trevor Davis, signing off.